just interesting, Stuart, that during the film we're making, and with this came up with the two curators from the Art Gallery of South Australia, that I said to them, to Lee there, that it intrigued me that in making a sculpture, that I believed that contemporary art in a whole range of ways should deal with the big questions. And so with sculpture, I admit that's always interested me in a contemporary way, the really big questions. So the one about timelessness, of course, in art making, but dealing with the big philosophical issues of the time we live in. And that's something with my sculpture I've tried to look at, and often it has been criticised as well. So just simply contemporary notions of questions of spirit at this point in time, but also other notions. So my forms, wave motions often form the sculpture, they create the form. This came from looking at contemporary physics. So notions in contemporary physics, notions about contemporary questions of spirit. Sculpture, because it's large, I think, can make big statements, and I think that's an important quality of sculpture. So I'm just saying, but it's got to happen in digital art in a whole range of ways. But I like the idea of art in general, asking big questions and trying to answer them, attempting to answer them.
I think that all makes perfect sense to me, and I think that you come from a sort of classical start in a way, whereby you're not talking about yourself, you're talking about the things that are around you. The way I could answer, I think what you're talking about for me is, if you take the way a city's designed, and that there is a classically beautiful European city that we have an understanding, a workable city in a way. One of the things that makes cities difficult these days is because of the population explosion. There are different needs. There are things, well, look, I'll go back to the city. A beautiful city that we all like to see. Like, I went to Russia recently. Don't approve of their current situation, but the cities, the castles, absolutely beautiful, medieval in lots of ways, and also how they look at against the skyline and those sort of situations. Where you might say a contemporary city, which has been able to be built because of contemporary abilities in concrete, in steel, etc. You used to think about you couldn't get a lift to go too high, you couldn't make a building stand too high. Now you can go 60, 70, 80 floors, and so that all sorts of contemporary things have made a contemporary look, but still. And it's actually one of the things I used to discuss with my mother, actually, who I worked with for 30 years after my father died young, there were immovables in qualities. There were standard things that mattered throughout whatever age it was. But at the same time, you need to bring in your ability of current thinking maybe your ability to currently make something in that way. And we're not trying to actually reinvent the wheel here, but we are reassuring ourselves of what has been timeless and we think will be timeless in the future. And that's where I see you.
Yeah, it's timelessness. So that for touchstones for me, philosophically, I'd say Joseph Campbell, who was the best-known writer of mythology of the 20th century, also Carl Jung. They're important touchstones for me. Campbell talks about when he walks into Chartres, the cathedral in France, and I've been in Chartres myself, and people can criticise religion in a whole lot of ways, in a way this is more to do with questions of spirit. You walk into Chartres and you're in this big void, and it's kind of like time just stops, and he points out too that this is what's important around questions of spirit and a sense of stillness and such. So in this very old building, which is based on some very interesting geometry that actually came out of Islamic geometry, a lot of people don't know that, but you walk into this building and suddenly you've got a sense of stillness and such, and that's probably something now, making this film, we're just staying in a tower 34 stories up, incredible views, but I would lose my mind staying in that little space because there isn't a sense of sacredness or stillness about it. Chartres has got that.
Yeah, well, I went with John Olsen to Chartres actually, and of course it was a place that Lloyd Rees loved too. But somehow or other, that represented the time before and the time after. And in a contemporary sense, it was actually captured better probably than anything else that was going on at that stage. It just was the it thing that is about the spirit that you talk about. It was encapsulated in that moment. It was probably lucky that technically to build a building like that was complicated and stained glass was complicated, so that we weren't able to do it quickly, etc. And it's in a way, when you look at Frank Gehry, for instance, I think he's one that's tried to talk about those same sort of qualities in our own time, using modern materials and not being modern for its own sake. But trying to, you need to have the brakes on a little bit to get that same thought to go. Whereas Chartres, I think they were absolutely extended themselves to as much as they could. Every single person, the architect, the thought behind it, the religion, the spirit. It was they really pushed it to the limit. Whereas, and they didn't have many materials to be able to do it by comparison to today, so that you get somebody like Gehry.
You'd see it do a very extended opera house.
The opera
as well.
house. I was just going to took the words out of my mouth. But I've always said Australia's tested two things out. One was the atom bomb, and one was architecture, and one worked. And that building, that opera house, which was...
and of course, I know this pattern of sculpture myself, that it's an incredible battle when you try to put something up that has a timeless about it and makes a statement. All sorts of little games come into play.
The opera house is a great example.
And he had a great battle with that.
Oh, well, that's a great... That went on... Look, to put it simply, we couldn't afford it any longer, so we started what do you call those things? A lottery to pay for it. So that really there were great men. The other thing is, I think, which is so interesting, is that that wasn't chosen in the first round. It was rejected. And then one of the judges left, and a new judge was appointed. And when he came along, he had said, well, if I'm going to be on this, I want to see what's rejected in the rejected pile first, and that was brought out.
Yeah. And in an Australian sense, perhaps this leads into something else as well, that for me, for development of a sensibility of sculpture in Australia, so my work about 92 moved from work that was more international style, it's kind of like the big picture one, and then work, the forms as such, starting to pick up on the forms you'll see visually in this country as you move around, more rounded forms, big horizon forms and things like that, and I was aware of that. And it's a combination of that, but also of going into the Australian landscape, walking across, and you have to feel it, and that's a good way to put it, but there was absolute sense of timelessness and something absolutely extraordinary about that landscape. And this transferred a bit over into, that's one reason I bought Palmer, that property of 403 acres, just north of Adelaide, and that's being restored now, it's a property coming back. But that also has, and when people go out there, they'll come from Melbourne, Sydney, from very much a rush type thing, and out there, suddenly they're in this quietness and stillness, and I've had people crying on the balcony when they've been there. I had one of the previous directors, it was interesting, from the State Gallery here, when she came out, and she said, I feel disturbed, there's no noise, I need some noise in the background. So there is a profoundness about being an artist here, and that's one reason for myself I've actually stayed here as well. It is a really profound place to work as a sculptor, in my opinion. Well,
I think so. Listen, just going back to the Opera House, we banished Utzum. When you think about it, it's got all the classic got all the classic things about us being dragged screaming and kicking into the future. And yet that is a really classical building in that sense. And when I say I think that Gehry has grown out of that. I think that gave permission for all sorts of things in the future in the terms of architecture and the way to see things. As it goes back to that walking you just described the landscape, that's that Fred Williams Rover Hot Thomas situation. And as you mentioned, Palmer, I think that about every third exhibition we have here now, or maybe even every second, is so entrenched in environment and the care of it. You know, people like Mandy Martin, who we've sadly lost, where they were artists are the foreseers of our own death if we're not careful, saying that we're going to be poisoning our land, poisoning ourselves, poisoning our future, etc. And your answer to that is not only the sculpture, but you are making that same attitude into the very land itself, and you've taken a barren, badly kept, destroyed landscape and you're giving it, breathing it with life again. And I think just yesterday you told me that there are 12 new bird species that you discovered at the entrance. So it is remarkable, and I think that a great deal of art that has a lot of meaning behind it in today's world is about the environment.
It brings a whole lot of aspects together. I don't think at the same time that art should just be about the environment. That's another danger in itself, because art covers a whole very broad spectrum of philosophical investigations and such. But for the times we live in now, and you and I have had that discussion before, that's the biggest issue we've faced probably for 50 years now. I mean, it's basically survival because of the environment's being basically destroyed. One of the central themes for my own sculpture, but it came more from a philosophical point of view, is that everything is interconnected. So I'm interested in holistic systems and everything's interconnected. And it's funny because John Nayland, who wrote both on monographs, said, why are you so interested in the re-veg at Palmer at one stage? I said, when you have that philosophical realisation, everything is actually interconnected, then naturally that transferred over to the environment. Because everything in the environment is, and so naturally you want to do something to try to look after it, protect it. And in terms of real value in life, when I was out there 2 weeks ago, as much as say I like eating out at a good restaurant and such, I couldn't believe the pure joy and hit I got from walking through that landscape and hearing 12 different bird species come back.
Absolutely.
It was substantial, it was real, it was a real deal.
Well, it's our deep health, our spiritual health. That's so important, and in a way, I think. Well, when you think we were first born, you and I, you're only a chicken compared to me, but we're
not by much.
We're in our 70s, or you're
Nearly.
just entering them. When we were growing up, we ate organic food because that's all you could get, and so this idea of preservatives, etc., is a very modern idea. And it hasn't, it's been wonderful in lots of ways, but it's also got a huge dangers. And I used to think when you went for a drive with your parents, to a holiday house or what have you, you would have to stop every hour and take the moths off your windscreen. And now through insecticide and what have you, they don't exist. We've killed them, and we don't understand the value of those moths and how important they are to our well-being. And it was very funny watching the Olympic Games here in Sydney with Kathy Freeman and all that, running and winning those races, and everybody else. Because there was so much light about, all the moths were there making their presence felt, which I thought was terrific. But there has to be a spiritual health, and I think artists are soothsayers, and they absorb situations, both good and bad. Look, in a way, I think all good art contains a very big spoonful of protest to make us aware of other things. It's just you, I think, and Arthur Boyd did this with Bundan as well, you have put your money where your mouth is and where your attitude is, that you are not only building the sculptures of landscape, but you are restoring a landscape as well, which shows that your spirit is involved deeply in well-being in two areas, and you wouldn't have gone to landscape, you wouldn't have gone to environment if it wasn't needing you, but it does. Yeah. So it's a side job almost.
No, it's something you develop along the way, and that develops philosophically.
Well, you're not satisfied enough to make a sculpture ignoring the well-being at the same time for all of us to be able to go and see it, to be okay, all those things. you are doing something quite fantastic.
Hopefully through sculpture you develop a spiritual growth along the way that you realise it's not entirely about you as well. It's about things outside you, and that's another really interesting sort of area to get into. So that it's interesting with contemporary paradigms we deal with now. There's probably been some contemporary art's become very much about almost the me thing alone. It's even the one that went on for a while that the most important thing about an art career was becoming famous. And I think, oh God, it's getting. But I think significant sculpture, significant art making, goes well beyond that, and it does have, it connects into more universal ideas and connectedness, and it's got something more transcending about it. I've said as an artist myself that one of the big problems I have is, and I think it's a nice comment, is that I've loved artists like Fred Williams and such as well, and then other people, somebody like when I was 17, Van Gogh. And one of the reasons for this, I go and look at these artworks, and suddenly I'm not thinking about me or anything else. Somehow I'm outside my body, and I've seen it at the museum, at Van Gogh's museum. I'm in Amsterdam. People go into the room and they just fall silent. So there is something absolutely happening there,
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely happening there.
And also I think they're tuned in to what we were talking about a bit before, that they are tuned in, that they are going in to see something that is internationally been given the tick. It is fantastic. So you go in there not to sort of, you go in there to expect that you're going to see something really terrific and wow. I remember seeing my first Van Gogh.
Paint with that guy paint.
But also all the feelings there, and they're not big. It's that great thing it just comes out of a small painting, and that was in its time. It was a shock. It was absolutely, that was a period when things were very precise and so on. And along comes this man, and actually it all just falls out onto the canvas. And he wasn't the usual person, and he paid the price for it, and all those things. But good on him, because there was somebody who did something completely by instinct, through a bit of madness, and made it one of the most important things in the world. I mean, the world, Van Gogh is actually one of the artists that almost everybody would know. Rembrandt wasn't too bad either.
No, he's bad.
Yeah, but look, I'll tell you, then we'll finish on this. But you have got some qualities. Greg John has the quality, which is rare. You can articulate about the art world, and you can articulate about your own work. And a lot of people, if they speak about it in the forms that you do, then find they can't make the work because it's been expelled from them. But you bring that quality where you actually explain what you're doing.
I quite enjoy the conversation for bringing out ideas and such as well, and I think it's a really interesting one. Current Dalai Lama said the 21st century, one thing it's about, it should be a period of discussion, and that's what he's saying as well, that there should be evolving discussion backwards and forwards. He's done a lot of stuff with contemporary physicists. He's actually been interacting with them as well. So, he's saying there should be a period of discussion. For the times we live in now, you touched on it before, around the environment too. That
it's greedy. We're greedy.
Well, there's a distinction because Wade Davis, a Canadian anthropologist, I like a great deal. He points out that we're essentially a technologically developed culture. Blackfella culture, Aboriginal culture, learn how to look after place, a bit more between them. So if we can get a conjunct between those two now, the technology development, but actually understanding that everything's interconnected and we need to look after it, then there's a real, future ahead, I think.
Well, I hope so. I agree with all of that to a degree, but I think we do have the issue of the globe as we know it, our mother, of which we are a guest, not the landlord. There's no more room at the inn. We've got a greedy race of people around us, and it can be dangerous unless we understand how to work it more.
Well, you need that. It might be a good finishing point too. So the anthropologist Murray King Boyce, who I studied with, worked with, and became good friends with, and she was a colleague of Margaret Mead's. she said that every Aboriginal child, by the time they were 6 years old, understood not as an intellectual concept, it was simply there, that everything was interconnected. Because everything was interconnected, there were cause and effect laws, and you had to look after place.
Yes.
That was 6 years old at that stage.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you still don't get that deep understanding, within our culture. Everybody can use a mobile phone to incredible proficiency now, but deeply understanding that everything is interconnected is still not. It's coming about. It's starting to come about, I think, now, but it's not. It has to become. It has to be just a natural assessment.
Sure,
and that's got a whole lot of implications.
I think it's a period where we've lost the sense of our soul, and I think we need to revisit that. And I think we ought to go to dinner.
Questions of spirit in the 21st century are very important.
Excellent.
Well, that's good, I think.